Welcome to session 13 and stage 2 of the Your Way Recovery program. As we move forward, your centering practices will be part of your written work. So we won't be beginning our sessions with the centering. We're actually going to use that in the written work. So that's available to you below the video. And the same will be true of your take-home tool. As there are description, there will be take-home tools. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start bringing in these brain hacks I created. I created these over time with my program to start helping people get into a deeper conversation. You know, I have that original class in my program, but then I had this deeper conversation that was about explaining the details of that. There are a lot of questions off that original video, and so this was there to address those questions. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to have one of those videos that talks about a deeper understanding of the brain and how it's working, because the understanding really helps us commit to the work, because we're like, oh, this is the benefit I'm going to receive. So that will be attached to your tool for the week, every tool, because our tools are going to change now. As I mentioned last week we talked about how, okay, all those early tools were to calm the system enough that we can do the real work. And that real work is stimulating that frontal lobe and challenging the brain so that we can progress forward. The video this week is going to dig into that. In addition to the video, what we're going to do is review the 12 steps of AA. I did mention this. Again, Alcoholics Anonymous is the most successful addiction recovery program on the planet. More people have recovered through AA than anything. And even though there are a lot of new techniques, even like mine, AA is foundational. And I'm going to talk about why it works, because it has some systems to it that are critical to recovery. But it is about working all 12 steps is the important part of it. And so there are parts of those 12 steps that I think can be a slightly different approach, but it's a really good foundational tool, especially if you've been in a 12-step program. It's relatable to you. I also appreciate feedback. I look forward to that. So in the contact us portion of the website, you can send messages. And if there's anything you'd like to add that I missed when approaching a step, please let me know. I am excited to hear about things, but recommend small specific things. If you send me a note about you should read this book, I really wish I had time to address things like that, but I won't. So give me pieces of the book that apply to what I'm talking about right now, and I will definitely include it in the program. And thank you very much for that participation. So we're going to start with step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. So we talked about this already in phase 1 of the program, but I want to give a little detail about this idea of powerless, being powerless over alcohol. There are so many people that haven't suffered addiction. Like most people are suffering addictions, and there are a lot of addictions they don't admit to, right? We might be addicted to social media, or addicted to television, or addicted to drama, or addicted to, we all have the things that are the survival mechanisms for our brain that are our go-to. We call them addiction when they're unhealthy, when they cause a problem in our lives or the lives of the people around us. And so we all have that. We all have those issues because of the brain we have, right? So we have these two systems in the brain, right? We have the subconscious autopilot of the brain. This is the programmed survival mechanisms and is 83 billion neurons. So this is the subconscious mind. Subconscious means we're not aware of it. We're only aware of it when it comes into consciousness. So you may be aware of certain geographical locations on the planet, but it may be that you don't consciously have awareness of that all the time. So when you recall memory into consciousness, this is what I'm talking about. So you have these 83 billion neurons in the subconscious brain, and they're all the workings. They're what tell my hands how to move, how my body how to move. There are a lot of different functions. What I want to talk about are the ones that are stored in the amygdala, which are the survival rules of the brain. These are the rules that kick our brain in when we feel threat of any kind, whether it's threat of status, threat of loss, threat of death, whatever the threat is, our brain perceives it as a threat. And so that subconscious mind, that amygdala, triggers and sends signals to the conscious mind that we experience as reality. So these are the 3 billion neurons. These are our current experience of reality, right? On some days, you might remember something and not remember the next. When you remember something, when you bring it into consciousness, these are the 3 billion neurons. So the subconscious mind is telling this to happen. So I'm going to give an example. If I point to an apple on the table and say, what is that? Your subconscious mind does a bunch of calculations and it throws forwards word like apple, red, sweet, all the things that your brain correlates with apple come to mind. And so that's what I'm talking about. But before I said the word apple, apple might not have been in your consciousness. It might have been that you haven't thought of an apple for a few days or weeks or months, even for some people. So, but it's there, it's in the subconscious neurons. But when I say apple or show you an apple, now the subconscious mind does all these calculations and throws forward the information so that you can say apple. This is why there are times where we can't recall things. When you think of things like dementia, when you think of things like, oh, why can't I bring that to mind? It doesn't mean it's not there. It's still sitting in the subconscious mind. You're just not accessing it. You're just not bringing it forward into consciousness. So when it comes to survival, there's very little the 3 billion neurons can do against the 83 billion neurons. The brain will kill us trying not to die. This is really important to know, that the subconscious mechanisms of survival win out all the time because the brain needs an immediate reaction. It doesn't have time to bring it into conscious and process it. So the conscious mind has very slow processors. We don't process as fast as a subconscious mind. So think of walking. We do this subconsciously. But when we consciously try to walk, it takes a great deal of effort and our full focus. If you've ever done anything like an exercise, like a walking meditation or anything, which we will be doing as some practices, then you understand it takes a great deal of subconscious effort. But once we learn it, right, what they call muscle memory, once we learn something, muscle memory is just subconscious mind memory. It's not stored in the muscles, it's stored in the brain's relation to the muscles. So those neurons are telling it how to work. And our subconscious mind is doing a ton. It's beating our heart, it's breathing our lungs, it's doing all this muscle tissue development and processing of information outside of us. It's doing a ton and it's really good at it. But as we learn in phase 1, addiction is the result of those survival mechanisms, particularly of that enlarged amygdala, that amygdala that sees too many things as threats. So our amygdala is supposed to respond to threat of death. If we're worried about getting or losing a job, or whether or not this person really likes us, or whether or not we're going to be able to pay this certain bill, those aren't threats of imminent death, but our brain is processing them like they are. And so that's the issue, is that the amygdala, in its sense, is not functioning well in our environment, right? So I'm going to talk about why that is. So that's why approaching the addiction itself is arduous and incremental. However, if we can eliminate the source of the problem, the survival mechanism itself, and shrink that amygdala so it's not so overreactive, then the byproduct, or the addiction, which is the byproduct of that enlarged amygdala, dissipates rapidly and organically. So here's your video for today about shrinking the amygdala. Your practices, like your centering and your take-home tool, will follow the video. So congratulations again on coming this far. Now is when you get to reap the reward of your hard work. For tonight, what we are going to talk about is, the question is, did you know you can shrink your amygdala? And on that topic, what I want to do is I want to return to some early information that I do in phase 1 that is often misunderstood, and that is the concept of an enlarged amygdala. Many of us tend to think it's a failure or only trauma related that we'd have a enlarged amygdala. I hear people say it all the time. I didn't have a difficult childhood, or I didn't have a traumatic event. Amygdalas aren't simply enlarged for that reason. Now, while it's true that if you suffered extended trauma or multiple traumatic events, that the amygdala can become more sensitive because it's reading the experience. But for the most part, we as humans are born with this enlarged amygdala. It is a part of being a primate, of being an animal, actually. So it's part of that original system, and what's happening now is that system is changing. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, is that change in the system and why our amygdala is enlarged in the first place, and then how we can change that. I'm going to give you some tools and some exercises. So to go back, I just want to talk about basic survival mechanisms of primates. And I haven't done this in this way in a long time. It's been a while since I've done a brain hack that's along this topic. So first of all, we need to realize that, so again, being a primate, there oftentimes this can go into the argument of, did we evolve from monkeys or not? And that argument is pointless. The concept of being a primate doesn't mean necessarily that we evolved from monkeys. Could it? Possibly. But it also is the fact that we are a species that is parallel to the great apes. So it's not that an ape turned into a human. It's that we're in the same genus, that there are different kinds of primates. Not all primates are great apes, but humans are most closely related to great apes. Actually, humans are a species of primate. And so the thing about primates is this: they are the weakest of all predators. And people have heard me talk about this before. The fact that primates are weaker than other predators. And so what they learned to do was to reason and analyze and examine in order to survive. So you'll notice, for example, a monkey, they will scream if you're in their territory, or they'll throw things at you. So this concept of throwing things is, of course, them reasoning through the fact that, well, we're weaker. So if there's a tiger out there, I'm weaker than the tiger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw things at the tiger, and that will keep the tiger away. And these are things that are carried through genetically. So for us in particular, we can look back all the way down our family line. And so this is where survival mechanisms become unique, because what your family line learn to do to survive is different than what my family line learned to do to survive. But all of those survival mechanisms, all the way back to when we were nomadic, living off the land, go back as far as you want in human development, and all of those mechanisms are existent. Now what happens is you may not have the same survival mechanism as an ancestor did 2,000 years ago, because somewhere along that 2,000-year line, someone in your family improved the mechanism. But if it's a mechanism that is either recent enough or hasn't been addressed, it's in the neurons that you're born with. And so those neurons will carry forward, and then that's what we utilize. So we have what's called primal fears that are established that we've learned to respond to. So good examples of primal fears are fear of heights. It's common that most people, if they are at risk of toppling over the edge or something, the brain will react. I remember going to a ropes course, And on that ropes course, one of the things was to climb up on this platform, and it was just a pole with a flat platform on top, just big enough for my feet. And it was really interesting. Jumping off wasn't as hard as standing up. So you get up on the platform, and because you've climbed up, you're either on your knees or, on your feet, but you're not upright, right? To get on the platform, you have to crawl on. And for me, I couldn't stand up. And it's not because I didn't want to, or even that I felt afraid, but my body refused because the pole kind of moved and the platform was only a foot square, so 12 by 12. So my feet were there, and it took me a long time to get my feet under me, but just the ability to stand from that position, I can stand without moving my feet, not toppling over easily. I can do squats or stand from that position, but my brain was refusing to have me do it. And I had to actually get help from the people there yelling up to me to things to do to get my body to cooperate, because it's really common that people do this. So this is an instant mechanism of my brain that wouldn't let my body move because it was sure I was going to fall. So other examples of this are fear of spiders or snakes. If you show any primate a snake that's never seen a snake before, odds are really high that they're going to have a strong fear response to that snake, because snake is a major predator of primates, right? Because snakes can get in trees, and the primates learn to go into trees to protect themselves, but the snakes can get in trees. And so fear of snakes is really common. Trypophobia is another one. This is one I personally experienced, and that is fear of certain patterns. Now, those patterns are things like decaying flesh, or places where insects could hide, or things that resemble the surface of poisonous animals like scaly or bumpy. And it's just a response to a visual image, right? But it's a primal response. I had trypophobia for a long time and didn't know what it was. I just knew I couldn't look at certain patterns. It would just be so upsetting to me that I would react with a panic attack. Right? So these are all these mechanisms, and all that information is stored in that amygdala. So this is a lot of information. So look at it this way. So if you first have primates that are the weakest of all predators, and then you have humans who are the weakest of all primates. And we had all this threat. Humans' environment is a threat. Temperature. I get an automatic reaction once the temperature drops below 32. I instantly know if it's below 32 degrees because my body tenses almost instantly. So you have temperature, you have people. So what we want to do is be able to shrink that amygdala so our brain has this ability to expand. So how do we shrink that amygdala? There's one clear answer: think hard. So our ability to shrink the amygdala really has to do with being able to go into complex thinking skills. So really triggering that prefrontal cortex. So I'm going to talk about pretty much three major ways we do this, and introduce ideas on how you can implement them. I tell everybody 20 minutes a day. 20 minutes a day of doing these practices will shrink your amygdala enough in 5 weeks that you can visibly see the difference in size. So your amygdala is about the size of the tip of my finger. You can shrink it enough that you can visibly see the difference. Neuroscientists have done tests where they visibly see the difference in 5 weeks. So I'm going to give you some practices to help you do that. So the first one is to go new places. Now, I do caution you to do this responsibly during COVID. there is the virus hasn't changed. It's the same virus it was in January. Our ability to prevent it is the same as it was in January. Our ability to fight it is the same as it was in January. So it's really important to realize we are still in a health crisis. Even though there are people who are choosing to loosen restrictions, we still need to be aware of the dangers of this virus. So as you go to new places, do it responsibly. We don't wear masks to protect ourselves. We wear masks to protect others. If you're a healthy person, you might be carrying the virus and not know it, and you could pass it to other people. So that's why we wear masks, and that's why we wash our hands a lot. Wearing gloves is not advisable because it tends to give us a false sense of security. We have the gloves on, and so all of a sudden we think we can touch our face and touch things, but then the gloves have the virus on them. So the smart thing to do, I carry hand sanitizer. Wash your hands a lot. Don't touch your face. If you are touching a lot of things, make sure you wash your hands before you even remove your mask or get your hands near your face. That's going to really help prevent the spread. Part of going new places too is I recommend going places that are remote. Go to a national park, or go find places in nature to go where you live. There are canyons here. I went through and did the fun task of, I had a client where we would do our sessions outside, and so we would just go and look at Google Maps on our phone and find places that were green, and we would just go and check those out. There are a lot of really cool nature parks that are more like the canyons here than I realized, and so I got to see a lot of those. I walked the Jordan Parkway Trail from, I don't know, maybe it was at least 124 south, I think, further, all the way. I've now walked it all the way down to Rose Park area. We walked it almost to Rose Park. The two of us, just every week we'd pick a section and walk it. I want to walk the rest of it all the way up into Utah County, and I intend to do that. So that's a good go new places thing. Respect distance when you're walking. Keep to your side of the trail and give people space. Also, same with trail hiking. Masks really help because trails don't always give you the right amount of space to pass each other. Also, geocaching. This is still a thing I love. The one thing we have to be aware with geocaching is signing the book or leaving trinkets is probably a bit risky, but you can go find geocache sites and maybe add little notes in chalk. I love this concept of messages in chalk. All through my neighborhood, there are kids who are putting signs in windows. They're putting notes in windows to love yourself, to be safe, and they're drawing in chalk on the sidewalk. So draw in chalk on the rocks around you if you decide to go geocaching. So going new places, that's the first one. Second one is learn new things. And these are things that you're bad at. You need to be bad for it to work because it needs to require a lot of concentration. So this is a perfect time to learn new things. There are a ton of free classes online. I've taken free classes in social media. I've taken free classes in the science of happiness. I'm taking a free class now on Buddhism and psychology. There are so many free courses out there. So just go online and look at free courses. There are a lot of course websites that are offering free classes because of the current conditions of COVID. I have 2 free classes on my website, both one in brain function, that's called Relief of Suffering. This is on the Inspired Evolution Project. There is a free course on meditation on the same website called Become More Centered. So they're under phase 1, phase 2, under education. And they just show free courses. There are 2 of them there that will teach. They're good educational tools. There are free classes. There are YouTube. I don't think any of us could live long enough to learn everything that's available on YouTube. There is so much. You can learn anything on YouTube. Learn to juggle. Learn to make journals. I learned to make journals there. Also, another one that I recommend is to challenge the brain is learning things like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. These cause us to have to focus and concentrate on meticulous movement. They are really good to challenge your brain. The last thing I'm going to talk about is challenging the brain through doing things that it's bad at in a accessible way that maybe isn't learning a new thing necessarily. I do this through non-dominant hand work. So non-dominant hand work is like coloring with your non-dominant hand, or learning the alphabet, or learning to write. This is a lot of times we think we can't, but you couldn't do it with your dominant hand when you began. You had to learn. And so you can do the same with your non-dominant. So might feel like you're going back to being a child, but it's really good for your brain. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I hope everyone has an amazing evening. Thank you for being here and being a part of what I do.